Today we are diving into a really fascinating biblical puzzle. It's about where the whole idea of demonic possession actually came from. It feels like such a core part of the New Testament, right? But if you go back and read the Old Testament, well, you find a completely different story. So what changed? And that brings us to this central mystery. The New Testament is just packed with stories of Jesus performing exorcisms, of these malevolent spirits taking over people's bodies. But then you search the older Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, for that same thing, and it's just not there at all. It's a real head-scratcher. So to solve this, we have to start our investigation back in the pages of the Hebrew Bible, because here, the spiritual world operates under a very, very strict and clear set of rules. And the number one most important rule is this: nothing, and I mean nothing, happens without God's permission. Any kind of spiritual trouble, any tormenting spirit, it's all ultimately under divine control. There are no rogue agents here. A perfect example of this is King Saul. The text is so specific. He's tormented by an evil spirit, for sure, but look at where it comes from. It is explicitly from the Lord. This isn't some random demon causing chaos. It's framed as an instrument of God's will. You can think of it like a divine chain of command. God either allows or sends a spirit. That spirit then troubles a person. But, and this part is absolutely crucial, the human, in this case Saul, is still held morally responsible for what they do. Their own will isn't completely erased. And this isn't a one-off thing. We see this pattern pop up elsewhere. In the book of Job, Satan isn't some rebel king of an underworld. He's more like a prosecuting attorney in God's court who has to ask for permission to do anything. Or in 1 Kings, a spirit is literally sent out by God on a mission to deceive. The control is total. Okay, so we've got a really clear picture of how the Hebrew Bible sees the world. Now let's fast forward a few hundred years to the time of the New Testament. Because, wow, the spiritual landscape has changed a lot. All of a sudden, the world is just teeming with these independent, hostile spirits. These are not agents on a divine leash anymore. They're seen as autonomous forces of evil, and they're acting in direct opposition to God. The entire rulebook has been thrown out. And this leads to a totally new phenomenon in the biblical story: demonic possession. We get these incredibly vivid, intense stories of people whose bodies and minds are completely taken over. Think of the Gerasene demonic, or Mary Magdalene, or the young boy seized by an unclean spirit. This is a whole different universe from the theology of the Tanakh. Let's just put these two worldviews side by side for a second. In the Tanakh, the spirit's source is God, and a person's free will is kept intact. In the New Testament, the spirit's source is independent. Human will can be completely overridden, and God's role shifts from sovereign controller to the direct opponent of these evil forces. It's a massive shift. So this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? What on earth happened in that gap? In those silent centuries between the writing of the last books of the Old Testament and the first books of the New, something fundamental had to have changed. And this is where we find the missing link. The answer isn't buried in some lost scroll. It's right out in the open, in the history of the cultures that were swirling around ancient Israel. See, this period between the Testaments was this incredible melting pot of ideas. The Jewish people came under the influence of the massive Persian Empire, then the Greeks, and then, of course, the Romans. And each one of these cultures brought their own unique ways of seeing the spiritual world to the table. First up, from the Persians, Jewish thought ran right into Zoroastrianism. Now, this introduced a powerful, game-changing idea: cosmic dualism. The idea that the universe wasn't just run by one sovereign God, but was actually a cosmic battlefield between a good God and an evil one, and both had armies of spirits at their command. Then came the Greeks, and they populated the world with what they called daimones. These were like intermediary spirits, living in the space between the gods and mortals. And these beings could meddle on human life, sometimes for good, sometimes for ill, and could even be the cause of what they called divine madness. And from nearby Mesopotamia, there were even older ideas, like the utuku. These were evil spirits that people believed could literally inhabit you and make you sick. And here's the key: they had developed these very formal rituals, performed by priest magicians, specifically to kick them out. Sound familiar? Okay, so let's connect the dots. How do all of these outside ideas solve our mystery? Well, it all comes down to what you could call a great synthesis. During this period, Jewish thinkers didn't just copy and paste these ideas. They absorbed them, they wrestled with them, and they reinterpreted them through your own unique monotheistic lens. A foreign concept was sort of brought in-house, taking on a new life within a Jewish worldview. And here you can see the final result. It's a complete transformation. Spirits go from being agents of God to autonomous agents of evil. Human will goes from being accountable to something that can just be hijacked. And the solution to spiritual problems changes from personal repentance before God to a ritual exorcism. The mystery is solved. So the big takeaway here is this. The idea of demonic possession didn't just appear out of nowhere. It wasn't a sudden invention. It was the result of a long historical evolution, a blending of ideas that happened as cultures bumped up against each other and shared their stories over hundreds of years. And that really leaves us with a final, bigger thought. It just goes to show how profoundly the ideas we borrow from the cultures around us can reshape our entire understanding of the world. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What ideas are we borrowing today, and how are they quietly shaping the world that we're building for tomorrow?